It's real. It's real. You know the deal. You know the deal. Come on.
Hey, it's Shante.
And I'm Natalie, and welcome to What's the Deal, a podcast powered by the Norfus Firm. At the Norfus Firm, we solve people problems, and we have the great pleasure of working with companies all over the world on human resources and diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. Here we are, back. You know, when we were getting ready, I was like, oh, you can see, okay, we just, as is probably clear from those who watched us more than once, we have a new setup. We're going with casual, homey,
Yeah,
actually, because we're in our
literally, we're
respective
in our
homes.
homes. Stripped down, efficient. I don't know. What are the other words that we can use to
We
describe?
pivoted to be thoughtful of conserving resources and energy, right? But the fun thing is there's still elements of the old set.
Yeah,
You're sitting on the couch. I see
yeah.
the pillows.
There's pillows right there.
This is one of the
This is the
two
plant.
beautiful plants that flanked us, my little baby, that grow for 2
Yeah.
hours.
Aw.
So we're still here, which is fun. I think it's like us even choosing to do this is like the message is the message. It doesn't have to come and look like, oh, look, and I forgot you had the little crystal lamp over there. See, we pulling through the themes,
The things that are important. The things that are important.
Exactly. That couch is comfy as hell. So
Yeah.
that was definitely the biggest
Good
win out
move.
of this. That it was saved.
That's it.
So we are in wild ass times,
Yeah.
like up is down and down is up and all of the things, right? And so um we've had our earlier episodes in this year have really just trying to kind of reset and get restable on DEI is still important. People still want it. And today we want to in at least this first episode, want to get into like, don't buy into the hysteria, right? The sky is not falling. Everything's not illegal all of a sudden because we're seeing executive orders signed and everything thrown around, right? We want to bring some levity here today in looking at like this too shall pass, meaning the sort of the hysteria and all this mass confusion. And DEI is not inherently illegal, right? And I think that while the 3 letters have been so villainized, I was thinking about this last night. I was like, this is so crazy. You would think that we're saying your mama is ugly.
I mean, wow. Like, we really cussed her out on Thanksgiving in her house.
And told her food was
And told
nasty.
her food was nasty.
We're talking about 3 letters. Oh my goodness.
And what I saw recently, I saw on social, someone was like, have them actually say the words. Like, say it out. Don't just say DEI, because that's easy. Say diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then so you could tell us exactly which one of these words or all the words you actually don't like.
Right. I love that when you sent it to me, but can I just tell you, like, I thought it was such a good message. If you're against DEI, which letter? Tell us.
Which one? Tell us.
Tell us which, because again, it's just an acronym, right? Is it diversity? Is it equity? Is it inclusion? And by the way, the country you live in is mad diverse.
I mean, that part.
So when you think about the letters themselves, they actually represent, in my opinion, facts and the human condition, right? So if you look at diversity factually, when you look at the definition of diversity, which is being composed of differing elements, this country is diverse.
Very.
Right?
Extremely.
Even people who've lived on the same block as neighbors for 50 years are diverse from one another. They share being neighbors. They share the same neighborhood and street, but they're right. So it's like, this is a fact. This is not like we are manufacturing it and trying to create a new reality.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking about inclusion a lot as a human condition of all of us need to be included. It makes me think of like when my son was in preschool, the only way you could distribute birthday cards at the school is if every single child in the class got an invite, right? Because at that little age of 2 and 3, like you can't be excluding people. Eventually they make their own friends and those types of rules go away. But I also think that gets at equity too, right?
They sell this whole thing as a melting pot.
True.
Like, they tell us that from the moment we get into school, and they start teaching us about America, about how we have all these different, and everyone's welcome, and people can come in and bring us your poor, and you're tired, and all blah 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 blah.
Exactly. So some of what we see today is an attempt to rewrite history. It's an attempt to gaslight the shit out of us on the facts and realities of life. I mean, it is a full-blown mission on, this is like gaslighting 101, right?
Yeah.
Like trying to tell us what's true is not true. What we see is not what we see, right? Like all of these things. And so, of course, it's frustrating. Of course, it creates frustration, right? Those are all normal. But what it's doing right now is creating like panic and hysteria, which are just frankly not productive.
At all. And it's crazy because you're thinking about how are people supposed to deal with it. Puts people in a weird kind of position where they have to discuss and justify and talk about things that they shouldn't have to discuss and justify and talk about. It's like these are just
They've already been discussed
basic
and
things.
justified and talked about,
Like,
right?
why are we doing this? Why are we what is the point? But
And that's the gaslighting part of it,
yeah,
right? I mean, it's kind of like a conversation you and I had yesterday that was just about work, where it's like, wait, we already established this. Like, why are we talking about it again?
Right.
That's gaslighting, right? Where you're like, what? Why are you trying to package this up as something new? Like, this has been long since established in
right.
like it's in history books, right? We saw it's interesting. When we were doing our research, there was an article about how the U.S. Air Force, and yeah, you see, she's already setting up how ridiculous this is. The U.S. Air Force has videos that they show their trainees that include the history of the Air Force. So one of the things that these trainees see is a video about the Tuskegee Airmen and sort of what role they played in Air Force history, and the WASPs, which were the women Air Force folks who were also segregated. Both of these groups were segregated by the U.S. government. Historically, it's true. It's history. It's not. We don't like. It's there. We can't make it not have happened. The Army pulled the videos for their new trainee class, and in light of the president's executive order banning DEI, and it's like that is absolutely ridiculous. This is history, right? And so a senator sort of tweeted like, basically, this is bullshit. It's malicious compliance. This is, you know what I mean? And it's like that kind of stuff is bullshit.
It's like, why would you do that? What's the point? Like, what are you trying to accomplish here? What are you really trying to do? Because how did you even think that was acceptable to pull that from the training curriculum? When all y'all want to talk about is let's teach American history. But so are we saying it's only certain parts of American history? Is it only certain like aspects of this that we are allowed that are American? So all of this brings up to me, it's all dog whistles, it's all code, it's all signals, and it's like, stop, guys, it's too much. And all of this is happening at the surface, but there's still meaningful work and meaningful things happening underneath, which I think is our point of like trying to really get underneath it. We're encouraging everyone to just kind of clear out the muck on top and really get underneath what's happening and what people are actually doing, because there's really some substantive work still happening in this space. So
So there really are like two, and yeah, before we get hysterical and too hype, right? Because the energy is kind of moving in that direction.
Yeah.
And again, I think to be very clear, having that reaction is normal and it's valid. It's just sort of what we want to talk through are two things. What we want to talk about is how do we walk ourselves down from the hysteria, right? The fact that you may feel it in the first place is natural and valid. Like that's we're human beings. But the two big things for us today in this episode is oh, look at that. Me with my hand created. Oh, that brought us down from the hysteria.
The universe is like, you need colorful balloons in order to discharge some energy. Thanks, universe.
Exactly. All right, we are hyped this morning, afternoon. Let me bring it back. Okay, how do we step ourselves down from hysteria? One is pretty balloons.
Pretty balloons.
One might be taking a walk.
Right.
One might be coming off of social media and not and avoiding the doom scrolling, right? But that's that piece. But the big picture of this is twofold. One, everything's not illegal all of a sudden, which we'll get into. And two, how does it impact your employees if you're doing reactive things every time you see something new come out on the news, right? And that's sort of where we'll fall into our respective lanes on that, of course. But just as a recap of what we've said over a couple of episodes now, DEI is important now more than ever. We know from the data and the stats that I'm sure we can flash up at some point because we've shared them over and over. Employees want diversity in the workplace. It's impossible to avoid, really, because again, we're a very diverse country. That's the D. The E, people want to know what the rules are. So they want to make sure there's a fair way for them to succeed and that they're not being shut out from those opportunities. And inclusion, like my birthday card or birthday invite example, is helping people to feel like they're part of the place that they're contributing to in terms of their work. Those are still valid, viable concepts. Yes, there have been lots of challenges to the concept of the words DEI, but not really the substance of DEI, right? Again, it's the acronym, it's the words. So there's that main piece. And then if we really take it one step further on, well, what does this mean? Right. And of course, I have to say, I'm not your lawyer, although I am a lawyer. And so you should go get real legal advice or advice from your lawyer, because I'm a real person saying real things. But
And a real lawyer. You're actually
and a real licensed lawyer.
Yeah.
But the reality is that you will always want to make sure that any of your workplace practices, as it relates to people or anything else, comply with the law, right? And so that still rings true. And then the other piece of it is that the things that these executive orders or things get at, like I've said to many people, the president doesn't have the authority to order such things, right? So there are a prime example of that was freezing federal spending. Well, there is nothing in the Constitution or any other law that gives a president the authority to freeze funding when it's already been approved by Congress, right? So a judge enjoined, which simply says you cannot do this, and so that will not happen. That executive order, because by law, the funding that was approved is allowed to be spent. Mm-hmm. So when we apply that and we look at what's happening, workplace wise, this means, and actually not just workplace wise, but this means there can be a lot of lawsuits, right? So that's a reason to stay calm, because yes, these broad proclamations have been made out there. Can't do this, it can't do that, but they're subject to legal challenge. So we know, for example, with the DEI executive order, that there's already a lawsuit that's been filed by the city of Baltimore and other groups around the scope and the breadth of what has been sort of ordered not to happen when it comes to DEI. And we saw this in Florida a few years ago when the anti-DEI legislation came out. Again, there were tons of headlines. Everybody's freaking out. Oh my God, don't say gay. Don't do this. You can't do that. But very quietly, the headline said, oh, but it was enjoined. And to this day, the anti-DEI statute in Florida has never been allowed to be applied because it was unlawful. And that has been pretty much concluded. And I think the Supreme Court denied review, but the 11th Circuit, which is the appellate court that covers Florida, was like, nah, this is against the Constitution of the United States. So I would just hope that one of the big takeaways folks have from this is what we say before, always read beyond the headlines and center yourself on what's permissible and what's not.
But let me ask you a question in there, because you can't be the only one who knows this, right? Like right? One would hope.
Of course I'm not.
People out here who realize that these things are like what he's doing. Most of it is, again, he can't do. It's unlawful. So what's actually like what part of the strat, like what kind of strategy is this? What is this what is he trying to do in putting out all these executive orders and creating all this mayhem? That is, if he has people behind him and smart people are around him who know that this is actually not going to fly. What's actually happening then?
So if you've ever seen a robber movie, you know, like Ocean's 11, there's always a diversion scene, right? Somebody's super dressed up to a ball they weren't really invited to with something in their ear, telling someone in the background, these are all the things that's happening. And then poof, some big thing, like some big explosion happens and everybody's walking around and the diamond is gone, right? Now, I don't know what diamond will be gone here, but to me, this is sort of like textbook create a diversion and create a distraction. And so many people, so many smart people who also know what I know, right? Other lawyers and other people are falling for it. And so for us, some of it is, we're not telling you that some of these things are not upsetting. Of course they are. But what we are telling you is, once you've had your moment, let that be shorter than you stopping to say, okay, let's reframe this.
So we're in the middle of a heist?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Time will tell what gets taken.
So when thinking about it through like a wellness lens,
Sure.
right? I mean, I've given some tips, but this is definitely not my expertise. Think about it from a leader or an employer standpoint, like in managing. So their response, how they're showing up for their employees, you know.
So I mean, we're all human, right? So there's an element, and I feel like this is also part of the strategy, is that people know that we are naturally going to just physiologically have to figure things out when we perceive things a certain way, right? And so this constant barrage of like this hysteria, this madness, and how people are talking about this can feel like an affront to a lot of us. So it's a safety issue for many.
Yes.
And so what happens when we feel like we're threatened in that way? We go into fight or flight. It's a natural human process, right? Your sympathetic nervous system gets kicked up, your adrenaline, your cortisol, you're getting ready to like, what am I supposed to do in the face of this perceived threat? So what's required there is, one, there's a couple things that are happening from the employee's perspective. You really got to be like, okay, wait, this is not a bear. It's not a bear. I'm not being chased. Oh my God, it's not really, this thing is, the way that they're talking about it is just how they're talking about it. Let me dig a little bit. Let me pull myself out. Let me dig a little bit and really understand what's happening within my organization. Right? Because you can only control the space that you're in and where you work and what's happening there. You really can't look outside of that, because it just makes it worse. So like, try to kind of bring the blinders in a little bit and focus on what's happening in your world. And really understand that from the employer's perspective, you have to be mindful of the fact that people are reacting to this. It's a natural reaction. It's happening. People's well-being is being impacted by these messages, is being impacted by this hysteria. If you're real about it, yours is too. You may not feel like you're a part of the group that's being directly talked about, be it women or veterans or Black people or, LGBTQIA. Like, you may not feel like you're a part of that group, but you still manage or oversee or lead people who identify with those groups and see this as an attack on them. And so how do you lead? How do you manage in that environment, in that reality? Well, one, you have to have the awareness of it. So you can't discard it. You can't just pretend like this is not happening. It's happening, guys, right? And it's having an impact on people. And so you have to really make sure that on top of, making sure things get done, that you're checking in with people and their well-being and understanding that it's going to impact creativity. It's going to impact innovation, because if people are in that heightened sense of fight or flight, all they're trying to do is get to some sort of homeostasis, some sort of safety, some sort of like, oh my God, I'm okay. And when you're trying to do that, there's no energy, there's no space, there's no mental anything for work, really. Like, to do work well, there's no space for that. So you, as a leader and a manager, now have yet another thing that you got to deal with, and it's tough.
So one of the things that I hear from what you're saying, which I think is takes me back to my SAT teaching days, is right size the problem, right? And in SAT teaching, it was like take things in bite-sized pieces. And I think that with the onslaught of information we get, we knew this before now, but certainly now, every day, if you just pick up your phone, you can't, it's hard to avoid if you're going on an internet, right? Like if you're using your phone to search for something, if you go on LinkedIn, if you go on Facebook, it's like you're constantly, it feels like an attack of information. This tip that you're giving in is like, bring it in. What's within my actual sphere of influence right now? How can I regulate myself so I don't see this as catastrophic? And I will say, we've modeled for you everything we're talking about so far because we were hyped. And another way in which we've done this, which I, of course, is a huge shout out to Shante, is like we talked to our team about how they were feeling about all this. Shante, in our projects meeting, Shante, we had a whole agenda for other things, but Shante went with the vibe and was like, I just gotta check in, right? How is everybody feeling? This is the work we do. How are you guys getting calls? How are you dealing with it? And that was off the heels of me doing it a little bit more indirectly and asking the team sort of what they thought, what did resilience mean to them, and how were they, finding their own version of resilience in these times. So like between the two of us, it was my sort of indirect method of talk to me about like resilience and how you're applying it these days, and Shante going straight to it and saying, how is everyone dealing with this? Both are great and both demonstrate that we care. I particularly loved, though, the conversation that we had around how Shantae's prompt, because it allowed us to kind of see what people are thinking about, what support they might need, what kind of gaps we might need to be filling in on information, how we might be able to be more transparent. And then she's like, all right, let's move on the agenda. I was like, no.
We had no time. There was no time left. We'll reschedule that. But that's really that's inclusive. That's empathetic leadership, right? Like, and that's all we're asking for our leaders. Again, this is a podcast for leaders, right? Leaders and people who support them. It's acknowledging the energy that's in the room, acknowledging what's there, and not just like steamrolling through things. You're dealing with people. People have to do this work. People are having a tough time.
I will just say this, and then as always, I have to be the time police, but I'm in the middle of an investigation that has multiple witnesses, like 10 witnesses, 12 witnesses actually, and really at the crux of what's going on is the team feels severely overworked, right? There's some other sort of legal issues that have been pointed to, a few policy issues, but the constant theme, and what I absorb every time I talk to a witness, is we have so much work. It's too much work. We can't do all this work. And we keep telling them we can't do all this work, and they keep telling us, do the work. And then they add more work, and then they add more requirements. And it's tough because in one of them, I could feel this woman almost hyperventilating about how much work she has to do. And so, of course, I always go back to the client to let folks know, like, maybe someone should check on that person. But the reason why I'm saying that is that just in general, people are overwhelmed, right? What we're seeing in the last month is it overlays on top of what we've been telling y'all, that folks are tired and they're out of steam. Now, what we're seeing now will only exacerbate that, unfortunately, because people were already had a lot of tension, right?
You're talking about from the pandemic, couple of elections, the whole George Floyd murder, like all these things have just compounded on top. We haven't had a break from anything. The wars everywhere, like what?
And so it's bizarre to me, and I'm saying this to any CEO leader on this that listens to this episode. It is bizarre to me that you would keep your foot on the gas and try to push human beings further than they are capable of going under these circumstances. At some point, it is inhumane. At some point, it's just downright cruel.
Yep.
And so when we think about what we're saying here today, it comes back to consider people in your decision making, because until robots can do everything, you still need people to do your work. and to move your business along. And if you don't consider their humanity, we're going to keep getting headlines of people getting laid off, right? Some of that comes from whatever you think your people are doing. It's not enough of to make them enough money, so you have to do layoffs, right? It's just going to keep deteriorating.
Mm-hmm.
We can pause and say, what do we need to do now? What are we allowed to do now? What do we need to be thoughtful of now? So that you can center people in these decisions, because it is really difficult to watch, what's been unfolding here.
Yeah.
So if we recap it, number one, hysteria is a normal reaction, but it's not one that has to guide all of your actions, right? So take a moment, process it, and realize this will pass, it's temporary, and how can we move forward in a way that's productive? Number two, everything is not unlawful all of a sudden. Make sure that you have your advisors in place, your lawyers. Get the advice early and often. And the third thing is thinking about the well-being, not just of yourself as a leader, but also of your people, and understanding that we have lived really in unprecedented times for the last 5 years without a break, as Shante alluded to, and things fall apart when people don't have breaks. Okay, so we're going to keep talking about these issues and the ways in which you can practically handle them, because 2025 is going to be a really interesting year for the workforce and the workplace. You know where to find us, but I'll tell you, thenorfisfirm.com/podcast. We're on Instagram under What's the Deal in the Norfis Firm, TikTok under What's the Deal, LinkedIn under the Norfis Firm. Follow us, subscribe, tell us what you want to hear, and we'll see you soon.
Bye.
Here it is. Diversity, equity, inclusion, and leadership. That's the deal when you know what you're dealing with.